Yeah, how you been, man?
Doing well, doing well. I mean, I'm super excited to have you on. And yeah, it's crazy because as I actually wrestled in high school, and part of the curriculum was we needed to watch Vision Quest,
Get out.
and every single year we had to watch it. Actually, we watched it in practice, so I grew up, watching you, man, every year.
So what year? So wait, what year did you wrestle, and what year did you graduate?
Yep. So I graduated high school in 2006, and I started wrestling my freshman year. And so actually, freshman, sophomore,
Oh,
junior,
two.
and senior year.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Uh,
So yeah,
so
it's true.
this is kind of, okay. So I'm wearing a jersey right now because this is what I did a podcast earlier today for this called Nutrition, Cutting Edge Nutrition with Shute. So I do a Friday nutrition podcast every week, and this is a jersey that now is being sold by Comp Edge, .us/Shute. That's so we have a collection, kind of the signature Shute, jacket and singlet and this jersey. So that's just now popping it. We just added it this last week, and so I'm kind of tied. I just signed with them, and I moved from a couple other business apparel companies to this one because they kind of have their eye on the ball, and they wanted me to do a nutrition podcast, and they're doing a whole collection, and it's just they want me to write a book. So there's some really cool things that are happening with them. And the reason I really wanted to do the nutrition podcast is because we have this thing in wrestling that has been a long-standing thing that is such a detriment to the sport, and it's like cutting weight. And it's been done in such an unhealthy way, and it's also super impractical when you come to like, hey, how are you going to perform? You're going to perform at your highest level when you cut 10 pounds right before you got to wrestle, and you got to suck weight, and you got to drop your water, and then you're exercising all night, so you're depleted physically, hydration's gone, nutrition's gone. You're not going to have any endurance or long-term strength if you're going to try and be in a wrestling tournament. That just isn't possible. So I don't know where we've it's been this thing. I know you probably experienced it maybe back when you were wrestling, how people would drop dramatic amounts of weight, and then as soon as they weighed in, they would just eat a bunch of food and try and rehydrate and get nutrition in, and you just can't do it quick enough. And nowadays, they've got those machines of segmental analysis, so you're gonna get on that, and then you're gonna wrestle about an hour or two later. So they're not doing like day before weigh-ins like we used to do.
Yeah, yeah. I know it's a lot. It's a lot more difficult, for the guys in the lighter weight brackets because I mean, this. In the lighter brackets, you got the 103s, and then it goes 110s, and the weights are only 5-10 pound difference. And then it gets to the bigger guys where it's 90s and 215s, and then heavyweights. So there's a bigger.
285s.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
weight, 5 pounds for someone that's 113 compared to 5 pounds for the 200 pounders. It's a big difference, and
Yep.
I used to feel bad for these guys that would have to cut weight, and you'd see them jogging before the tournament and spitting in cups,
Yep.
and by the time they get in, they were just drained. They spent more energy trying to make weight than they did in the actual match, and it was unproductive.
Well, that's my point. And so my goal is like, let's educate, let's get everybody on the same kind of mindset. You're going to be like eating and drinking into matches, and here's a safe way to get down to the weight you need to get down to. Anyway, that's my big push. I'm hoping to leave that kind of hoping to leave that because it's with the wrestling community, and just that's not going to be an issue going forward with any luck. So, and be there 2 weeks before your first match. And you need to start at least 2 months out. Depending on how much weight you have to lose, you want to start at least 2 months out. And I tell people the beginning of that whole story is you got to cut out the white foods, you got to cut out the junk foods, you got to cut out the pro-inflammatory foods. And I go into those more in depth in the podcast. But anyway, if you do that, your body naturally just starts to lose weight because you're not having the sugars and a lot of carbs and the empty calories that are going to just, just stick to your mid, your midway, I want to say to your midline, to your waistline. Anyway, it just starts to melt away, especially of these kids in high school that are working out. I mean, going to wrestling practices and then training, they're on a pretty intense schedule. And so if you just start to take away those sugars and those empty calories, body just burns everything off and you'll just naturally get down. I worked with a coach that was 250 pounds and we took it over a course of a year. And I just started taking away all the high sugar foods that all the high glycemic foods he had in his diet. And basically the other piece was, and this is going to be interesting, I took him off diet soda. And because diet soda is just the opposite of what it says. On the can says diet soda. And what happens is when you drink diet soda, it dysregulates a couple of hormones, and those are the ghrelin and the leptin hormones in your body. One of them says store fat, the other one says I'm satiated. So it tells your body store fat and eat more. And so you just naturally take people off diet soda and they'll lose weight almost instantly if they're not feeding all the rest of these carbs with like, oh, I'm going to have bagels and ice cream now. But so if you take away all those sugary foods, you take away the high carb foods, and you take them off diet soda, then the body just burns stuff up and the weight just starts to fall off.
Yeah, and definitely one of the challenges with diet soda is that the body doesn't know how to digest it because it's all artificial sweetener, so it just ends up being stored in there. And so no, definitely. I mean, that's one of the things that people make that mistake, that they think that they're doing less harm by drinking a diet soda, but all soda is bad, but the one with sugar, natural sugar, might actually be healthier. But cutting those all out would be a huge help.
So I actually ask people to go off sodas and diet sodas, and both of them have that caramel coloring. That's actually a carcinogen. It's actually been proven, and they had to actually say, yes, this is an actual carcinogen, and you're drinking that every day. That's not what I want to do with my body. So besides the sugar content, besides the artificial sweeteners, which are really hard on the gut, as you said, it'll start to degrade what we call the tight junctions in the gut. So then you start to have a separation in those junctions. They're not tight anymore. They start to separate. Now your nutrients that are too big and are not digested will slip through that tight junction and into your blood and start to cause all sorts of autoimmune and inflammatory responses throughout the entire system.
And kind of learn a little more about, because I know definitely there's a lot of folks that would benefit for this type of information, and not just the wrestlers, but just in general, some of these best habits.
Yeah, so I'm started working with a company called Competitive Edge. And they're producing a podcast for me called Cutting Edge Nutrition with Shute, which I do live every Friday at 3:30 West Coast time. So it's 6:30 East Coast. And then it gets put across the social media. So you can view it again if you need to. My goal is really to just bring some more awareness and some nutritional knowledge to the wrestlers. This is, well, I have to say that just for the last 2 or 3 episodes, I've been focusing on, how to shore up and support and fortify your immune system, because we're right in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
So I have, to me, it's like, this is the most important thing I need to share with wrestlers, but also their parents and their grandparents. And so they're really user-friendly, meaning they're not just dialed into the wrestlers. But I always try and give them just one extra little piece. Like when I told them that sugar needs to be out of the diet because it will feed bacteria and viruses, suppress your immune system, dysregulate your hormones, and set you up for athletic injury. And I go in to tell them how excess sugar in the system, then looks for receptor sites, which are on your protein receptor sites is the one that it prefers, which is your muscles. So, and when it locks onto those receptor sites, it creates what's called a really rigid bond. And so now the muscles have lost their ability to function at the higher levels. They have this rigid bond within them. And when they get challenged, they more than likely will tear instead of stretching and contracting. So now you have what's called a sugar injury, or an injury due to too much sugar in your system. So everybody can benefit from that knowledge, but especially the athletes.
So I got to ask now, if the fans tune in and, and they listen and then, they go through the program, how long does it take for them to look like Shute?
So, I was a bodybuilder for almost 5 years before I got cast in that role. So I was going to Eastern Washington, and I was training 3 days on, 1 day off, and I had done that for 3 years. And I was on a very intense, I was, I have to laugh because I think back, I was eating 5 platefuls of food at every meal because I was just trying to get as many calories in as I possibly could, because all I was thinking about is gaining weight. So then fast forward, the role, I just happened to be, I was an athletic trainer for the Eastern Washington University. And so I was the athletic trainer for the wrestling team at this specific time. And one of the wrestlers was in the movie. His name is Rick Thiefalt. He'd already been cast. He was an extra. He was a wrestler. He was in some of the scenes in the classroom as well. Had been wrestling at Eastern Washington, but took that semester off because they were paying him, and he was like, I'm getting paid to wrestle. And so he was just really into it. So he came in, and we're sitting there watching wrestling practice, and he starts talking about this movie and said, they're still looking for somebody. They're looking for somebody that's 6 foot tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, muscular build that can wrestle. He goes, hey, that's you. He says, you got to go check this out. And I just was not into it, but he eventually wore me down, and I went in. And so it took 5 auditions.
Wow.
And to eventually, and I could go through it, but when I finally got the role, I was at 215 pounds, and they were shooting in 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
And so I had to drop 25 pounds in 2.5 weeks. So I went from that total mentality of like just gorging myself at every meal to I had 2 meals a day. I would have a breakfast with some egg whites, and then I would have lunch, which was a salad with some tuna and a squeeze of lemon. And then I would get on an exercise cycle and ride for an hour at about 4:30 in the afternoon. And I burnt down. I just sucked myself down so fast that I was experiencing all the symptoms that Matthew was experiencing in the movie, his character. So I got lightheaded, and I was angry. I was up, I was cranky. I actually, during the filming, got elbowed, and my nose would not stop bleeding. So we had to have it, chemically cauterized while on the set. So everything that he went through, his character anyway, was what I was actually going through just to rip down. And when I got down to 189 pounds, I was at 4% body fat. And because I did a submersion in our school and the human performance lab. So I did one of those water, submersion tests. I was at 4% body fat, and they now don't allow you to go below 7% body fat when you're wrestling now. So it's a health thing. You need to have healthy fats around your organ systems to maintain them. So anyway, I was ripped down. So how do you want to put yourself through that? You certainly can. Build for 5 years and then rip down for 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, because 4% body fat is insane, and you were supposed to be the 170 pounder, right? 171 pounds.
168.
68.
Yeah, 168 pounder.
Yeah, because Loudon had cut down.
Yeah, and I actually ended up weighing 189 pounds, and I think that Matthew was pretty close to that same weight, and he was doing just the opposite. There was a nutritionist that was on set, he was training on working out to build himself up. He was on all this nutrition. And so he was building himself up, and I was ripping myself down to be closer to his same weight.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, the parallels, because yeah, the cutting weight, the being dehydrated, the bloody nose. Remember, Loudon had the bloody nose as well too. They literally took everything that was happening to you and put it with Loudon Swain.
Well, that's what happens when you cut so hard that your body is actually feeding. Now, this is what I remember most, is that my deltoids were starting to ache. The protein was actually breaking down, catabolizing, so that I would have energy to do what I needed to do during the day. That's how intense it got, because it was just such a hard thing. And this is exactly what I don't want wrestlers to do at a high school and college level, because when you do that, I looked good on film. I was ripped, I was down, but I didn't have strength and endurance. And man, this is exactly what you need if you're going into a match. You better have some strength and endurance. You better have some kind of reserve, and you better be like topped off with your hydration, your sleep, your nutrition. All that needs to be taken care of. This is what wrestlers need to take care of outside of training, technical issues with, and being trained by their coach. So this is their job. This is what they need to handle.
Did Matthew Modine have? Because I mean, you already had experience, wrestling, and you were also training wrestling as well. Was it hard to work with someone? Did he have any wrestling experience at all, or was it kind of hard to do those scenes with someone that like Matthew?
So, because you're a wrestler, it's like your first year, you're still pretty you don't know what you're doing. You're still trying to figure it out. You're trying to figure out, am I in the right position? Do I hit this move when they hit that move? Where's the counter? What do I need to be doing in this moment? It's a complete learning curve. In your first year, you're just like absorbing, and you totally suck mostly. At least I did when I was wrestling the first year. And so it isn't until your second and third year, maybe, you actually start to comprehend, like, oh, I know exactly, I have 3 moves. If he hits me with this, I have 3 counters to that. I know what I'm going to do. If he does this move, I have my counter to his counter. And so you're playing more of a chess match. And, Matthew did not have any wrestling experience prior to this. He did train for almost 6 months with the team and with a Cash Stone, which was the gentleman who was the referee in the final match.
Yeah.
He was also the one that gathered all the wrestlers together. He was a wrestling coach for years at Meade High School. And so that was his job, is to get everybody together and to get the actors up to the level that they needed to. And so they worked with Matthew. He did a very good job, given just a short amount of time that he had to learn the skill. And when you look in, you can kind of see like, an experienced wrestler might not do that. He might not reach over the top. He might not do, so you can pick it apart and see it. But I think it actually worked. And I thought he did a great job of not only in the wrestling aspect, but his character it had all the range that I thought that he was able to go from having kind of this fun, kind of comedic sense to being very intense to being, connected to Carla. So he was able to go through this whole, arc of the character and carry the movie. So his job was to carry the movie, which I thought he did.